Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation on Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sara Jane. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Scott Holmes. Hi, Scott.
Hey there.
And our guests for this program, the fourth, I believe, in our series of Selfish or Harder to Manipulate, are two or more of our authors, and that is Lorree Appleby. Hello, Lorree. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
And David McLeod. Hi, David. Good to have you with us. Now, I'm actually going to introduce their chapters. David's chapter is chapter 2, Mind Over Manipulation. And Lorree's chapter is actually chapter 3, The Risk of Living My Truth Instead of Somebody Else's. So thank you both for joining us. And I'm going to actually start by asking you both to share a little about yourself and just a tidbit about your chapter. I'm going to start with you, Lorree.
Okay, thank you. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and I am a radical living master coach and shamanic practitioner, and I was led to do this work because of the journey that I've been on, really knowing who I really truly am, and starting out having no idea just from life circumstances. And my chapter was really one of my coming of ages stories of what happened and what I was faced with 5 years ago when the world went into lockdown, and I had to stand in my truth, and I had to be okay that everyone had different opinions and different belief systems, and I had to grapple with decisions that I was making that other people were making, and it was a huge growth experience for me. And now on the other side of it, I'm much stronger, and I'm much more in my heart and have much more compassion for everyone and myself.
Thank you. David?
The question of who am I? Well, that has been the question of my life. And what I find interesting is I have a sense of who I really am, but I still am very reluctant to make a claim about exactly who I am, because it's constantly shifting and new information is coming in, and I'm getting deeper and deeper. It's a process. Do you understand? So I think of myself as a seeker and a finder in some ways, because I am discovering certain truths in my journey, and it's led me to this place of doing a lot of writing nowadays. And I've got many books to my credit. Mostly collaborations, but a couple of solo books as well. And I'm trying to build my credibility on YouTube and other places, so people understand who I am and what I do. And I try to help other people get deeper and more deeply connected with the truth of who they really are. So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, David. Scott, share a little about you.
What about me? My goodness, I thought it was about the guests. Well, I'm here every week, every other week with you, and I'm an intuitive energy healer. Not that I like the word healer, but the work that I do with people allows them to heal themselves. I think that is one of the most important parts of it, is finding yourself, is being able to heal those parts of you that you don't want to see, the parts that you have rejected, those parts that are put away in the closet and you don't want them to come out, and you lock the closet and leave them there. Unfortunately, at 3 o'clock in the morning, those things you don't want to see come out when it's just you and the boogeymen that come out. And I found that what most of my clients need is just to hold their hand, to be able to look at them square in the eye. And the more that you face them, you realize them, you accept them, the smaller they get. And instead of filling the room, they fit in the palm of your hand. And that's when you can really tackle your fears, when you can walk past them, when you can carry them with you, knowing they're there, but also be able to walk forward. And I think in all of us, in the chapters that we've written in this book in particular, is how we found ourselves and are able to walk past that, those things that we were taught for so many years. I know that for me, it was you show love by doing for others. That if you do for yourself, you're very, very selfish. You should never do anything for yourself because your job is to serve. And in that respect, I did that most of my adult life. And it then turned around. And now I can give more of myself now that I found myself, if that makes sense. There's more of me to give. There's more of me to understand. I'm not frustrated. I can be who I am. I can say no. It's a complete sentence, I found out. No is a complete sentence. That is amazing. So David, I'm going to ask you, with you speak about authentic self, and you've really delved deep into that. And what is it shown for you now lately? Because I know you've been on a path of discovery.
I think what I have learned about my own life is I spent probably the biggest portion of my life, well, the biggest portion so far, denying the truth of who I really am so that I could live up to the expectations and standards and so forth of the rest of the world. It all started when I was about 2.5 or 3 years old. My mom was upset with me, frustrated, and in her frustration and in her omnipotence, because that's how I saw my mom, she said, "I know you better than you know yourself." And at the time, of course, I had no reason to disagree with her. I had no reason to think that she didn't know what she was talking about. In fact, quite the opposite. She's my mom. She knows me better than anybody else does. She takes care of all my wants and needs. She says she loves me. And of course, she would never lie. So therefore, she must know me better than I know myself. And that led me onto a whole journey of saying, well, if mommy knows me better than I know myself, then daddy knows me better than I know myself. Grammy and Grampy and Uncle Joe all know me better than I know myself. Pretty soon I had convinced myself that everybody, all my friends, all of the authority figures, all of my teachers, all of the ministers and policemen and everybody else that I saw in the world, they all knew me better than I knew myself. And so I had developed a practice, or not a practice, but a habit, I'll say, of deferring. And so if someone ever asked me, well, what do you want? And I said, oh, I don't know, man. What do you want? And I would go along with whatever they want, or what do you think I want? Or what do you think I need? Or whatever. It was really pretty bad. And of course, it all came to a head when I was in my early 40s. I suddenly realized, I woke up one day and I thought, wait a minute, I've been checking all the boxes and doing everything that society has told me to do, but I don't feel the happiness. I don't experience the success. I don't experience, all the joys that I was promised. Something's not right. And I hadn't quite got to the point of saying they're all lying to me. I hadn't got to that point yet. But you see, what happened there was I realized I had given up my true self. I had allowed myself to be defined by other people. And so I was walking around wearing all these masks and costumes and you name it in order to accommodate what other people expected of me, and developing a sense of resentment and unhappiness and just total misery in my life. Right? So that was the first part of my journey. But the next part of my journey was really all about saying, I got to get out of this mess somehow. And the only way I could figure out to do it was to run away. So I ended up doing that. And slowly over time, I started encountering people who were more open to the idea of me being who I really am rather than some false pretense. And over the course of the next 10 years or so, a lot of those costumes and masks and stuff started falling away. And I began to realize, the truth is, I've never really known who I am. And so now trying to find that out while at the same time trying to own it and stand in that power with people. Well, now I was creating a different kind of problem for myself because not everybody wanted to hear what I had to say. So, okay, they don't want to hear what I have to say. Well, that's not about me. That's not about me anymore. I wasn't taking it personally anymore. So it was just a long process to the point where I finally got to the stage where I said, well, you know what? It doesn't matter to me what they think. I mean, sure, I'm interested in their perspective, but I'm not going to be defined by their perspective anymore. That's when I started to get the sense of the authentic me, the real me. And in the course of doing that, I experienced many, many people in my life suddenly disappearing. People who were previously in my life really wanted nothing more to do with me because I wasn't living up to their expectations anymore. A few of them were okay with that, but I hate to say it, the ones who were okay with it were a lot fewer than the ones who weren't okay with it. And so today I've reached a point where it doesn't matter to me whether you like me or not. I would prefer it if you liked me, but if you don't, that's okay, because that's not about me anymore. I understand that now. So I guess I won't claim that I have achieved 100% authenticity. I've still got work to do. I've still got my own shadows to deal with. I've still got my own, complex belief systems that are active, and I've got an ego mind that likes to, assert itself at sometimes the most inappropriate moments. And that is just part of life, isn't it? But I'm much better now at dealing with those issues than I ever was, 40 years ago when I was in the midst of this stuff. So I don't know, that's probably way more than you wanted to hear, but that's how I answer that question. And so I'm going to shut up for a while.
Lorree, is there anything more about yourself and your story? I absolutely remember what your story is. You talked a minute, you said the pandemic, and I was 100% with you, 100% with you. But I know there were an awful lot of people who weren't. But was there anything more about yourself, about finding out who you are, to know who you are on the inside, that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, just trying to think where to start with that. It's been a slow burn, we'll say, the evolution of myself. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I did ask for that. I started out very withdrawn, very shy, really, the classic people pleaser. And I realize now that the paradox of feeling that I wasn't enough, and then also when I would also feel like I was too much for other people.
Yep.
So it was a constant shape-shifting myself to who I thought other people wanted me to be. And I became very good at it. And it served me for a time. I don't regret any of that because I know that was, I believe that was part of my growth experience. And in speaking with others and working with others, a lot of people can relate. And so really it was life really becoming a pressure cooker and me doing all the things, checking all the boxes, like David was saying, that you do all the things and who am I? And about 10 years ago, a woman that I was working for asked me, she was a business coach, and she asked me, what do you want, Lorree? And I could not answer that question. And I realized, wow, I need to answer this question. And I've been on that journey of what do I want? And then who am I ever since? And then I started to really be aware of how much I was not even aware of who I was because I was too busy focusing on my environment and my relationships, and how I could feel safe if everything around me was okay, if other people were okay. So classic codependency, if you want to give it a label. I had those relationships with many people in my life, and I did all the things that I guess an average woman with children and a family and a partner and all of that did. I took all the roles on. I worked, I raised children, I carried the mental load, and my husband did the best he could, but he was also going through a lot of grief because he lost both of his parents in a short period of time. So that, I also feel that was part of the experience, so I would take on all that extra. And, I really got to the point where I was trying to be perfect. I was trying to be the be all end all for everybody. And I couldn't do it. So every day I was waking up or I was ending my day feeling like I failed, because there was always something or someone that I couldn't make happy, or it wasn't right, or whatever it was. And so I burned out big time. And, a lot of different things happened. My body started really screaming at me. I had car accidents. I had a panic attack while I was driving. I had some warning signs, physical, just all these wake up calls. So paying attention to those is what led me on the journey of getting to know who I really was and what did I really want. And so that I would feel that's like something important to share, is that we all get those signs, the universe giving you the gentle tap on the shoulder, and then it gets louder and louder and louder. And if you pay attention and if you don't, well, yeah, you're going to have a big one. And us humans, we often need to do it the hard way to really learn the lesson. So, I've had my hard knocks, but I've also said, okay, I'm listening. I'm listening. Just go easy on me, and I will listen. I will follow the guidance that I'm feeling, and take the steps forward. And it's an unfolding, and I don't think it'll ever end till I'm transitioned on.
Yeah. I can see that, and really very similar to my story. I would always put the cape. I always called it the cape, the Superman cape, and make sure that even if I wasn't the one that was sleeping or was safely tucked in bed, that everybody else around me was, that everybody else was, their needs came first. I needed to make sure that they were protected, that they were safe, that everything I did absolutely everything I could in order for them and my family, my girls. And when all that was gone, when my girls had gone to college and then they got moved away and then they got married, and then my wife got ill and then she passed, and I was kind of left there, me and the cat. And the cat really wasn't a great conversationalist, by the way. But I didn't know what I honestly wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted, who I was. I did not know where to find me. And my daughters have told me that I am, selfish. They look at me that way because I have traveled to the Far East. I've traveled to Europe. I've traveled to South America. I've done the traveling, but it's for me to find me. I know that I didn't have to travel thousands of miles to find me, because through meditation, through yoga and the things I do on a regular basis, I could find me but I needed perspective. I needed that different outlook. And for me, traveling allows me to see things through other people's eyes, through where they live, how they live. And it allows me to understand. Much like if you've ever seen pictures of the statue of David, right? The David, right? And you see pictures, you can see it from different angles. And my daughter, she did Europe in her junior year in college. And she said to me, I've seen the pictures 1,000 times. She says, but I was standing there looking at the statue, and it has a pull, it has a vibration. She said, I stood there for half an hour just in the presence of it. So there's one thing to understand something, and it's one thing to just actually understand fully, deeply, instead of just here. And I find that, especially with me, that understanding, going from head to heart, and really coming from the heart, makes all the difference in the world in how I live, how I see, how I perceive everything that I do, and the connections I have. So I fully understand exactly what you mean. Is just finding yourself in any way that you can. Other people look at it and say you're selfish. As David said, you find people peel away, or you're not giving of yourself so much, and they're not receiving what they need from you. So they kind of go, oh, well, I don't want to ask him because he's not going to do it for me now anyway. So I'll ask somebody else who will do it. But it's those core people, that true core people who know who you are, who've seen you with your vulnerabilities and your chest wide open, and still accept you.
It's so important to realize, masks have been sort of mentioned, that we aren't the uniform that we wear. I went to a convent, so we very much had a uniform for going to school, and we had different uniforms for PE and all the rest of it. But then the job I had, one of the first jobs I had, we had a uniform for that. We aren't the clothes that we wear. We aren't the job titles. We aren't the wife, the daughter, the mother, the sister, the cousin. They're just aspects of who we are, but they aren't who we are. And yes, I know this is about women, but I know men can do this as well. And especially, I suppose, if you've got children, it's, oh, hi, I'm so-and-so's mother. So your child's mother, or I'm so-and-so's wife. But this can happen with men as well, especially if it's men at I don't know, their wives' work do, or the other way around, it's whatever. We can all do that. It's almost as if we belong to that, rather than being ourselves, rather than saying, oh, I'm Sarah, so-and-so's my son. We don't introduce ourselves. It's not about who we are. And it's changing that. But isn't that part of insecurity and the not knowing who we are? Because we've attached ourselves to something to try and help us to know who we are. But going back to the want, I don't remember it being said, but it is so ingrained in me. I want, don't get. So if you ask me what I want, I'm probably likely to say nothing.
And then you get what you want.
Because you're not going to get it, period.
But you are going to get it if you ask for nothing. That's my point.
I don't want anything. What I would like, what I would choose, that is different. But since stepping into this world, this understanding, I want leaves you with the wanting. I need leaves you with the needing, because that is the first word that comes after the I. That is the power word. So it's the I am. And so I very much try to keep those words want and need out of my vocabulary. and when I hear people saying it, I think, I wish you wouldn't use that word. But what have we all said here? It's, I don't know what I want. But is that from a very similar perspective that is mine, but maybe not gained in that same way? That insecurity of, well, why would anybody give anything to me? It's for me to give to others. And that's, in some respects, and I've shared this before, but I have been in that place of, oh, sort of, why would anybody do anything for me? And I remember asking my friend Trevor, and I said, but it was the way I put it to him. I'm going to ask you if you can do something for me, but if you can't do it, it's okay. You can say no. And I think I was very much like that when I said it. And he gave me one hell of a ticking off. It was, that's not very friendly. That's not very nice. If I can't do it, I won't. I'll say so. But if I can, I will. And so I asked, and he said, yes, he could, and he did. But at the same time, I was getting an oracle card that was, let yourself receive. You get so much pleasure from giving to others. Give others the pleasure of giving to you. And so with that ticking off from him and getting that card, it was just like, okay. But it's being able to be in that place of acceptance and of understanding of yourself and why you are with a particular thing the way you've been. And I suppose that very much fits into the I wants. So that negativity, that insecurity, that people pleaser, yes, absolutely, the not knowing who I was. And hearing people say, oh, I know who I am and I like who I am. And it was just like, how? I don't get that at all. But I do now. But I didn't for probably a good 40 years. So it's being true to yourself. And I know this is a word you really like using, David, sovereignty. But what does that mean? And I'm going to ask each of us to give what we think that means, what we think we feel that means. So I'm going to come to you first, David.
To me, the word sovereignty describes how I am part of a whole, but simultaneously an individual within that whole. And I have unique qualities, capabilities, characteristics, attributes, which might be shared by some of the other sovereign beings within that whole as well. So there's an element of holism, if you like. You know, you've got the whole and you've got the individual parts making up the whole. And each one of those parts has its own important, and all of these, by the way, are equally important. There is no one that is more important than the other. It's very important for people to understand that. So, you know, when I say I'm just as important as anybody else, that doesn't mean to say that you are less important because I am as important. It doesn't mean to say that. So importance is something from the ego mind anyway, and it's completely irrelevant, you know. But often we have to deal with both our spiritual nature and our ego mind nature. We have to deal with them both simultaneously. So anyway, that's kind of my take on sovereignty. I think a lot of people associate the word sovereign with royalty, with king, with queen, and that sort of thing. And on some level, I resonate with that because in my view, that sovereign being that inhabits me in some way is one of the major attributes. It's kind of like my connection to my spiritual nature. That's how I see it. So it communicates to me through intuition primarily. So that's how I'll say it. I'll just leave it there. Somebody else can speak now.
Lorree.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, David. I like that you brought up king and queen, because when I think about sovereignty, I think about personal sovereignty, and archetypes are a really helpful way to look at things. And for me, it's, being my own queen, knowing my worth, being true to myself, claiming what I want, having respect for others, taking responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, and actions, consenting to what I want to participate in and what I don't want to participate in. These to me are what personal sovereignty is. And I don't see a lot of that out there in the world. And I certainly wasn't in my personal sovereignty. I'm still working on it. However, when we can respect ourselves and look at ourselves and view ourselves as that queen or king, or however you want to look at yourself, but I am a soul, I am a sacred being, I am a child of God, however you want to look at it, but I have that worth, and I love myself, and everyone else is that as well, whether they recognize it or not. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, you're right. When I see sovereign, I always think of the crown. We refer to it in that respect, and it took me a long time to claim my throne of me, to be able to sit there and be able to fully trust. They always gave greater, no matter the man or woman, how that much greater power than the lowly people beneath them, right? But they were just those people that bore that responsibility and to be able to rule. And so it came a long time for me to take the responsibility that I needed to take for me to be able to make those choices, Sarah, to be able to actually want something other than what I was getting. To have expectations of other people, because when I did for them, I didn't have any expectation of anything back, and generally I got exactly that, nothing back. And so now there is a matter of consideration, there's a matter of sovereignty, and I feel like when you are sovereign, people treat you in a much different way. I let people know that I have expectations of them also. I will do for you if you will do for me. David, we've had these discussions about that in collaborations, right? Collaboration doesn't mean all one way. Collaboration means both ways, that there is a mutuality to it, that there is a mutual respect, that there is a cohesiveness, that there is a shared value. And in doing all this work, I don't know if you find that, but when you get in a certain group, you have that. It's almost intrinsic. We sit in Toronto in the U.S. in the middle of the U.S. and the U.K. and we are these little boxes interconnected in this collaboration that we have just at this moment, and yet we have this automatic respect for one another. I would love for to people to understand it and have that of themselves, that they automatically have that respect, that other person is sovereign unto themselves, and that the respect automatically goes to them. And it's an odd word. We do a lot of wordplay, right? About how words kind of change the meaning, and everybody has a different meaning for the same word. But this sovereignty really holds much more than I thought about it as we've walked through this, much more than I would have thought. And thank you for bringing it up, David.
I'd like to add to this because it's a fairly new word for me, but over 20 years ago, so while I was still living in my other little house, and I've been here nearly 20 years now, I thought of life as being like a clockwork mechanism, all those different sized cogs and wheels, etc. And if one of them goes out of sync, it literally can throw the whole lot out, and it can stop the whole mechanism from working. And listening to what each of you have said, so my reaction was, it doesn't matter what your role is in life. Life is like that clockwork mechanism. It doesn't matter whether you're a street cleaner, a porter in a hospital, a shop assistant, the king or the queen of the country, an architect, a brain surgeon. It doesn't matter what your role is in life. You are part of that mechanism of life. And with what you've all been saying, it's about within that mechanism, there is that give and receive. Because if one aspect works, then the other aspect can work, then the other aspect can. And so there's giving and receiving all the way round. If we all play to our strengths, play to our gifts, be who we are meant to be in this life, that mechanism of life will run more smoothly, because we will have that acceptance of give. And I'm going to say receive rather than take, because we have those people who are the takers. Regardless of whether people want to give or not, we have the takers. So for me, that feeling of the true essence of life is the giving and the receiving. And the receivers can give and the givers can receive. And so if people are struggling to see it from a perspective of we are all part of the whole, some people may require, all right, I can think about a clock and the mechanism, all its cogs and its wheels. And you've only got to sort of watch some programs that deal with things like repairs to see just how important one little tiny cog can be, and it can stall the whole thing. And so is that not the importance of us being who we are here to be true to ourselves, to allow ourselves to give and to receive? And
can I inject something here? First of all, I noticed that I'm having some resistance to the idea of a clock or any kind of a mechanistic structure, to be honest with you, because it implies rigidity. It implies a little bit of, well, the whole mechanistic view of science, to my way of thinking, is not it's not spiritual at all. It's kind of it's a way for people to describe what goes on in the world, and certainly it works as a descriptive tool. But my philosophy is quite different. I don't see us as participants in some kind of a mechanistic structure. I see us rather as, I want to say, energy forms. That's the only word that comes to my mind. Energy forms of differing arrangements of, atoms or whatever makes up energy. And we come in and out of existence because we all emerge out of this beautiful ocean of supreme consciousness. And we come into this physical world by transitioning out of that consciousness state. And then when we're done, we go back into that consciousness state. So our energy then kind of merges back into the pool. And so it's like if you take a cup full of that liquid and kind of pour it out and say, okay, that's David. And I take another cupful and I pour it out and I say, that's Lorree. And I take another cupful and I say, that's Scott, and so forth. That's Sara. For a while, those cupfuls of energy that I brought out are going to interact. And they're going to interact in different ways, and they're going to contribute things in different ways. And then sooner or later, one or all of them are going to go back into the big ocean. And if I take the ladle again and immediately pull out another cup of that stuff, as soon as we've all kind of merged back in, and pour that one out, is it not possible that that might lead to a, what's the word, reincarnation kind of event? You know, where whoever manifests in that particular instance might have elements of all our energy together. That's kind of how I see it. And so I can, as a sovereign individual on this planet, I can choose to just live my life and let life move me around or treat me, I can pretend that I'm living in a mechanistic world. Or I can wake up to some deeper truth, and I can become aware of this deep energy that's inside of me that somehow is still connected to that ocean. And I can start to elevate my consciousness while I am here on this physical plane. And if I do that, how am I shifting the world when I do that? If each of us did that, how do we shift the world? Can we improve the world by doing that? I think so. Can we damage the world by doing the opposite? I would say the evidence would support that idea. But you see that, so that, if it's just a case of like a cog in a mechanistic structure, that one cog can really screw up the entire works, right? Whereas I think in the reality, the works still continue to operate, and the cog needs to be repaired somehow, and that can be put back in, or I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of ranting right now. I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have said anything, but I think what we should all do is we should all wear uniforms.
No.
And the reason I say that, because we spend so much time and energy trying to look different or look unique. The reality is, if we all wore exactly the same clothing, then we would have to look beyond the clothing to see the individual.
I believe that's what's known as a nudist colony.
Yes.
So,
well, I'm saying, first of all, I would agree. A nudist colony would be a better choice. However, not everybody's comfortable with that. And, we got to deal with situations with children and stuff. So the uniform idea, I think, is actually has got some great benefits to it. So anyway, I'm just going to throw that out there. So I'm done now. I'm going to leave.
No, please don't. I love the fact that we can have different perspective about things, and we can share those different perspectives about things, because it is so important, because it will speak to different people. Because there were aspects of what you were saying which felt like that's exactly what I was just saying, but we said it in a different way. And I have no problems with that. So, Lorree, any thoughts you want to chuck into the sink?
Yeah, the uniform thing. I'm of two minds with that. I totally understand what you're saying, David. And then I also think about there's no individual expression if we all look the same. So I think it's the intent behind why I wear what I wear, or how I do my hair, or whatever other thing that I do to individuate myself. It's, am I doing it for others, or am I doing it for myself? Am I doing it for how I feel? Because today I want to feel bright and cheery, so I'm going to wear bright yellow or orange, or, another day I'm, feeling sporty, so I want to put my hair in a ponytail and put on sweats. And so to me, dressing the way I feel that day is an expression of myself. And in the past, I wore a lot of black and gray and, really like non-bright colors. And that was when I was really not knowing who I was. And I was just wanting to blend in with everybody else. And that was a big part of my agenda, was to just fit in, just blend in, just disappear. And as I started to get to know who I really was and what did I like and what didn't I like, I felt braver or more bold to wear a pattern or to wear something a little bit brighter. And it wasn't really for anyone else. I know some people do that. They do it to get the attention or to whatever. But for me, I was doing it for myself. So I get it. And my kids went to private school in high school, and they had to wear the uniforms. And it was a good thing because it was for the socioeconomic thing, because a lot of kids had a lot of money. Our family didn't. My father put the kids in. And so it helped my kids to not look, they fit in with everyone else because everyone was dressed the same. And so they were treated more equally and in school. But in life, I don't know, I feel like as we're outside of things like that, it's important to be able to express ourselves and how we feel and how does it make me feel. So,
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like a bit of both.
Well, if you've ever gone to any of the places where they wear uniforms in school, you'll see how kids do find individuation by having longer, shorter, tail out, pants underneath. They find a way to make it individual. So it's the fitting in of wearing the uniform, where it came from. If we wear the same uniform, then we deal with just the person and not everything outside. As you can tell, I never wear anything that's loud or just patterned or anything else. I blame my father. He used to wear pink and purple shoes and everything else when they went out dancing every Saturday night. He and my mom would go out big band and go dancing, and he had purple jacket to go with his purple shoes, and it just so I kind of blame him a little bit, but I always wear things that are a little bit different, and I enjoy them. I enjoy the color. When I was wearing ties, I would get Garcia ties, and they always had a bunch of colors, so I could wear the same tie with a bunch of things, but I didn't always have to wear the same color and wear the same thing. I don't do it to stand out. I do it to please me, in all honesty. And through my years, I've always taken notice of women, because women wear their feelings, period. How they feel about themselves, they wear. That's how they're feeling. So I always took very, very close attention to that. Especially when they wore bright red, then I knew I was in for it. So I've this whole thing about finding yourself, being comfortable in your own skin, allowing for non-judgment of other people. It's really, really interesting when you are in the mountains of Peru, and a family of 4 are out digging potatoes in their half-acre plot because that's all they have. And the kids, it costs to go to school, so the kids are being homeschooled, meaning they're part of the farm. But you know what? You ask them, they're happy. This is their life, and they're making the best of it. Now, judgment of somebody from the U.S. is, oh my God, how can people live like that? But it's perspective. It's understanding of who they are. They understand who they are. They're the closest to family, those things that are important. And then that allows me to question myself is what is really important to me? Is it everything that I have or everything that I do or everything that I can buy? Absolutely not. It's about the people around me. And that keeps me in perspective, and that keeps me grounded, and that keeps me there. And it allows me to not to treat everybody with sovereignty, with compassion, with understanding, with judgment free, with hopefully with a sense of equality. I don't know if that lends itself to anything or anyone, but that's what came of that.
Thank you, Scott. We're not that far off the end of the program, and I'd like to give everybody a chance to sort of say some final words. So anything that we haven't touched on that you actually think you would like to share? I'm going to come to you first, Lorree.
Well, I don't think there's a prescription for this life. Other than seeking and tuning in to what feels right, because everything we are led to is going to teach us something. So I don't believe in bad decisions or wrong. I used to think, I made the wrong decision, but there was an experience I needed to have. So that's what I mean when I say I don't think there's prescription, because I really do trust the flow of what I experience, what shows up in my awareness, what if things, don't go the way I planned, or they do go the way I planned. It's an ebb and a flow, and it's happening for me to learn, grow, and evolve. And, I think we're all growing into our sovereignty, into, what does selfishness mean? And, all these labels and all these shadows that have been showing up to, integrate. So do what feels true to you. And I think it's the only person that can really answer that question is ourselves. And it also is about experiencing life and, being open to the different perspectives of other people, not just staying in our, with the blinders on, because you're not going to grow in that way. You're not going to feel uncomfortable. So we need to experience things that challenge us. And then, okay, what is my truth? What feels good to me? What step do I want to take next? So, I feel like it's a good thing for people to remember.
Thank you, Lorree. David.
Well, it's interesting. I actually think that I wouldn't call it a prescription. I think we all come here with a plan. We start off in the spiritual realm and we say something like, I want to experience something like this, whatever this is. And we make some kind of a contractual arrangement with other spiritual beings, some of whom are going to come along for the ride and actually participate in our life journey, because maybe they've got something they want to experience as well. But some of them are going to stay behind and not necessarily participate in the physical experience. So we make this kind of an arrangement. And then we go through this amazing ride where we transition from the spiritual into the physical, and almost immediately we forget the whole plan. And so the rest of our life is really all about remembering that plan and reconnecting to this thing that we wanted to do. Because I guarantee you didn't plan every single little tiny itty bitty detail when you were back in the spiritual realm. But I'm thinking about my own life now, and I realize I would not have known this when I was first born, but maybe I did know it on some very, very deep level. But now, today, I am 100% certain that my whole purpose was to go through the experience of disowning myself, forgetting who I really am, so that I could understand just how important that really is. And to have that visceral experience of knowing that there is nothing more important than knowing the truth of who I really am. That is the lesson I have been trying to teach myself. And it is such an important lesson. I have come to the realization that without knowing who I really am, then I cannot possibly know what my real purpose is. So that is the first thing that each of us must remember, the truth of who we really are. So if you don't do anything else in your life, please focus on that one piece of truth. It's not about trying to make other people happy, because in reality, you can't make them happy anyway. And you can't make them mad either. You can't make them sad. All you can do is just do what you do, and they're going to have their own reaction. So quit taking responsibility for it. Own your own truth about who you really are. Take responsibility for that, and take responsibility for how you respond to it. And really, you can't go wrong really much from that. So that's my recommendation. That's my suggestion. And everything else will kind of fall into place.
Thank you, David. Scott.
Every Friday night, I get together with two of my oldest friends. We've known each other since we were 8 years old. We've known each other for 60 years, 60. Good, bad, indifferent. They accept me, they love me, and they see all my warts. Of course, being guys, they let me know about it all the time. But that kind of acceptance is rare. And it took me longer for me to accept who I was than for them to accept me for who I was, because they saw me totally. What I would ask people to do is treat themselves like they would to their best friend, to be there for them in the worst of times, in the best of times, and know that you can fully express yourself, you can fully accept yourself, good, bad, and indifferent. And damn, it makes the whole ride a lot easier.
Bless you. Thank you, Scott. It's about, for me, living from the heart and quietening that monkey mind, that ego that works from fear. The fear that has controlled all of us at some stage in our lives. And when we can let go of that fear, if you like, if we need to ignore that fear and trust the guidance of our gut instinct, our intuition, inspiration, trust the guidance of the love of our heart. For me, that I see is the connection to our soul, to the all that is. We are connected to each and every one. It doesn't mean, however, that we can harm another. But other people's idea of you not harming them is not your idea of you not harming them. We've got to accept the fact that we are all uniquely different. I say no to you. I'm not saying no to you to harm you. I'm saying no to you because it doesn't resonate with me and work for me. And I'm saying no to you, maybe as a tough love. It's time you did it for yourself. You can grow because you do it for yourself. I can grow because then I can go off and do something for myself. It's being what many would call kind, but sometimes that kindness and that caring can appear very tough and uncaring. Be true to who you are, always. Thank you, thank you, thank you to each and every one of you. I love these conversations. I love the different perspectives that we all come from. It's what these are all about. And we've got more of this series to come, folks. But next week, I am being joined by Anne Clint, and who actually is one of our other authors, but she's coming on as a guest with me. And she's going to be sharing about Liberate Your Life, which I think fits very well with some of what we've actually talked about. I love these programs. Sometimes they really do flow from one to another. So thank you to each and every one of you. I have put David and Lorree's websites into the chat, and I will make sure that if you're watching this video on YouTube, you will find their website and ours underneath in the information box below on YouTube. Thank you. Take care. Be safe. Stay well. Namaste, sweet souls.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.